Ah, bad democratic cities. You know them when you see them. They're the large cities where crime is sky high, homeless people are all over the place, and they can't seem to get the place under control. While this country saw a big arrival of people into democratic cities in the 60s and 70s, what we're seeing today is a big exodus out of these cities and back into the suburbs. I mean, can you blame people? They want peace, safety, affordability, jobs, and more space. What we're seeing today is a migration pattern that might influence politics for years to come. Today we're going to talk about the worst democratic cities of all. These are the cities that have been dominated by liberal mayors for years now, and in some cases, there hasn't been a Republican in charge for decades. And it's clear when you look at things like poverty and high crime and just bad government, there's a connection between liberal leadership and mismanagement. And it's too bad too, because a lot of the people that are suffering at the hands of liberal leadership are the very people that the liberal leaders are supposed to protect. But I don't think things are going to change. They keep voting them back into office every year, don't they? Let's take a look at the worst of the democratic cities in America. These cities need a helping hand. These cities are so bad. These cities are so bad. These cities are so bad. Democrat cities are so bad. This is the east side of Cleveland. It's not a very happy place. Cleveland's fallen onto hard times, in case you didn't know. I mean, it's not the worst place you can live. A lot of this city's okay, but overall, it's a pretty poorly run democratic city. You'd have to go all the way back to 1980 to find the last Republican mayor when George Voinovich ran this place. At one point, there were almost 1 million people in Cleveland. Today, it's like half that. High crime and poverty mostly, although government corruption hasn't helped. Cleveland residents have the lowest income levels of all major U.S. cities. More than a third of people in Cleveland are in poverty, and lots of them get welfare. This is actually the third worst place in the country for percentage of people in poverty. The two cities with even higher poverty rates are Rochester, New York, and Huntington, West Virginia, which are both currently under Democratic leadership. How has Cleveland's Democratic leadership set this place up to fail for so long? Some will say it was a weak stance on crime in the 60s that drove people away. Cleveland became even more dangerous back then, which took a lot of momentum out of a thriving auto industry. I mean, the 1967 riots certainly set this place back. And since then, it's been a long string of corrupt Democrat mayors all in a row, and crime's increased to the point now that it's 4 times higher than the national average. It's really cheap to live here, but property taxes are really high. Somebody has to pay for the high union pensions of city workers, right? Here we are in Memphis. This place has had one Republican in office since 1967, and would you look at that? This place is not ideal for a happy life. It's the third most violent place in the country. The murder rate is 6 times higher than the national average. But Democratic leaders here are going to keep the Memphis population under control by making sure they rely on assistance. The poverty rate here is 27%. I bet those in charge wish it was 47%. Poverty is made worse by welfare. You're literally paying people to do nothing, and when people do nothing, they get into trouble. Or they just sell drugs because they don't have to be at work. Then their kids repeat the cycle, drop out, get into trouble, get on welfare. And it's too bad. A lot of Memphis is a great place, and there's super people here, but the leadership has been letting people down here for decades. Look at the Memphis growth chart. The population skyrocketed to 650,000 people in 1980, and then it just stopped growing. Would you want to move here? Now, many of you know that southern cities used to be Democrat ages ago, and then the South got all Republican. But today, southern cities are getting Democratic again, sadly. Now, I could do a whole video on why big cities are mostly liberal, but it has to do with socialist viewpoints that sprung up in the late 19th century. It started with labor unions and immigrants who wanted more rules and laws and benefits. Then, by the mid-20th century, Black Americans came to the big cities too. They wanted the same thing. Hey, we want benefits and protections. And now you have the younger crowd moving into the big cities too, because younger people don't like when things aren't in order. They need more laws so that it doesn't feel like their lives are in chaos. They need to be told what to do and how to do it. So you have all these people moving to the big cities, but the most interesting thing is now people are starting to leave big cities, and the black population's what's the most interesting thing, because the blacks came to the big cities in the 1950s and 60s and made these cities more democratic. But today, they're leaving these big cities from the Northeast and the Midwest, and they're moving back down to the South again, making southern cities more democratic again. sadly. Now, St. Louis has been run by liberals since 1943, and they never figured out a way to deal with the huge part of its population that's poor, drug addicted, and dangerous. This place has had the biggest spike in crime for all major U.S. cities. Whoever the next liberal leader is here is going to have to deal with that, as well as a declining population. A quarter of the population gets food stamps here, and this is the second most dangerous place in the nation, although 90% of the crime is in one section on the north end of town. They're probably never going to vote Republican here in St. Louis again. L for L, liberal for life. Look at this chart. You can see how quickly Democratic leadership has taken hold in major U.S. cities like St. Louis. This line here means it's going up fast in case you can't read charts. Now look at a map today, and you're going to see there's large pockets of blue where all the big cities are, and all the rural areas are red. Out of the 100 largest cities in the country, 2/3 are run by Democratic leadership. The largest city that's run by Republicans, Jacksonville, Florida. Fort Worth, Texas is also a pretty big Republican city. And can we make a connection between these cities and the cities people are leaving? I think we sure can. These are run by Republicans. That's not very many. Over in New York City, 8% of people are out of work, and there's a 16% poverty rate. New York also has a budget hole of over $540 million as of this writing, but it's probably higher now. Now, a lot of that's driven by pensions and public payrolls. I mean, New York is $64,000 in debt per person. That's the highest rate in the nation by a lot. And that's despite the fact that many New Yorkers have high taxes on food and housing and transportation. New York spends more than double the national average per school kid, but a bunch of its schools don't even have accelerated programs. The current mayor, Bill de Blasio, recommended ending smart kid schools to push for diversity. This place has spent $360 million to solve its homeless problem, but there's more homeless people here now than ever. Last year, shootings in New York doubled, murder spiked by 20%, and burglary rose by over 40%, but New York took away a ton of money from its police force. It wasn't just New York that cut back on its police, though. A lot of Democrats across the country spent the last year defunding police departments, so they shouldn't be surprised when voters hold them accountable for the spike in violent crime, right? And as you know, the Democratic mayors that are cutting cops still have police protection for themselves. Imagine that. Okay, now we're going to briefly run through some of these. Now, San Francisco has a terrible problem with its cost of living and its homeless problem. While tons of really smart and successful people can't even afford a decent place to rent, San Francisco hands out tents and food, water, drugs, healthcare, mental health support, counseling, and cigarettes to anybody who lives in a tent. That's really smart. Tax your best citizens a lot and then give a lot of that money to people who don't work. Why would you work hard to get a place to live here and benefits when you can get it for free? And they don't enforce a lot of crimes here anymore either. Like, if you steal a bunch of stuff from a store and just walk out, the police won't do anything. Who does that? Baltimore's had one Republican mayor since 1947. So for 64 of the last 68 years, Baltimore's been run by Democrats. And when's the last time you heard anything good about Baltimore besides the good crabs? It's the fourth most violent place in the nation, and 1 in 4 people here depends on the government for money, food, and rental assistance. Trump called this place disgusting, rat, and rodent infested. Hey, that's mean. Chicago's had 10 Democrats and no Republicans in 84 years. That's a long time to drive a place into the ground. Today, Chicago has the second highest debt of all major cities. But of course, it's not the debt that we're worried about. It's more about the crime. Chicago's actually a good place in most areas, but the bad area is worse than hell and growing. While a lot of the Democratic cities have seen spikes in crime over the last couple years, Chicago's spike has been the second highest of all. A lot of these criminals sell drugs for a living, or just don't work, because 9% of the population's out of work in Chicago. So many people are out of work here at a time when they can't fill jobs. This is Kim Foxx. She stopped locking people up. The reason? Putting people in prison makes their situation even worse, and she feels it disrupts their family life. I'm sorry, what? How about the lives they disrupted by killing people for no reason? Disrupt their life. Sorry to disrupt your life, but we have to throw you in jail because you killed somebody. Yeah, sorry about that. Are we going to see an end to the crime and senseless shootings by people who are victims of bad leadership? I mean, Chicago PD's hands are tied. The political correctness here has gone way too far. Here's an interview with a former Chicago police officer, and he talks about this very topic.
You can't attack the police. They're the middleman. They've taken a beating for so long. You want to talk about why crime's going up 100% in every category in these major cities? The police can't win. Who wants to do that job anymore? You have to hold the elected state's attorney accountable for prosecuting shit. If they don't want to prosecute anything, what do you think happens? Criminals get emboldened. And they're going to commit more crime. They're going to commit more bullshit. But they're responding call to 911 call after another. Hundreds of homicides. Well, the Chicago. You ever heard of a clearance rate?
No.
Clearance rate is something in a city where it's the amount of cleared crime. It's the amount of solved crime. So Chicago's homicide clearance rate is around 20%, which means you can get away with homicide 80% of the time in Chicago. Yeah, we're at a very volatile time in our country's history right now.
Philadelphia's had 9 Democrats and no Republicans in 70 years. 4 in 5 kids here finish high school, and more than half of them are in poverty. Philadelphia has the nation's second highest murder rate, and it's majorly in debt. How do you fix this place? It's almost too messed up to fix. I think Philadelphia might be unfixable. I'm not kidding. If you can't fix your city, you can just bomb them. Perhaps the worst mayor in Philadelphia history was a guy named Wilson Goode. He was here in the 80s. Well, back in 1985, there was a police standoff here with some crazy people in a neighborhood. They couldn't get the people out of the house, so the mayor said, let's just bomb them. So he ordered the block bombed with dynamite. That explosion killed 11 people and burned down like 65 houses in the neighborhood. What the hell? Nappy, would you ever throw a bomb at your community if you were a Democrat mayor?
No.
I know you wouldn't, Nappy. I think you should actually be a mayor somewhere. I mean, it couldn't get any worse. Los Angeles has had 5 Democrats and 1 Republican in the last 54 years. It's a mess. 10% of the people are out of work, and 20% are living in poverty. Like San Francisco, it's super expensive to live there, but they cater to the astounding 60,000 homeless people in the metro area. 60,000 homeless people in LA County. That's bigger than some states' biggest cities. The Democratic leaders here have tied the hands of school teachers by catering to whatever political correctness rules the day, or the teachers just go on strike whenever they want. LA cut $150 million to its police, and the murder rate increased by 20%. That's not very good. The city of LA makes it hard to build affordable homes. This city also has 800 people trying to solve its homeless problem, but it's getting worse every day. And you know what a sanctuary city is, right? It's a city that shelters illegal immigrants, and it makes it harder to send them home. LA is a sanctuary city for just about everything. San Francisco, Baltimore, New York City, Philadelphia, and Chicago are sanctuary cities too. And then we have Detroit. Detroit's had 8 Democratic mayors and no Republicans since 1962. That's like 59 years. I don't know. Maybe it's 60 years. You just kind of lose count at some point. We know how bad Detroit is. It's the most dangerous place in the nation. It's just about the poorest, and 1 in 10 people doesn't work.
Did you know Detroit was called the least healthy city in the country?
No way. Well, that's not a surprise though, Mappy. Come on, leadership in Detroit. Get your people outdoors and off the bad stuff.
Liberals are stupid.
That's not nice, Mappy. They try, but they just keep doing the wrong things over and over. So Detroit's had a lot of bad mayors, but Kwame Kilpatrick might be the worst. He came in with this inspirational message about everyone rising up to fix Detroit. Some said he was a young, energetic hero. Then he spent a bunch of taxpayer money on a car for his wife and spent more than $200,000 on personal vacations and expensive champagne. That's not all. Then he got reelected, and then it got worse. To balance Detroit's budget, he fired about a third of all police officers. He took money away from firefighters. He turned off the streetlights and even stopped picking up trash. And the city still had a deficit. Oh, it gets worse. I mean, you could make a whole video about the things this guy did. But the worst was when he got caught having an affair. And then he fired the cops who were going to rat him out. Well, the cops sued him, and the mayor used $8 million of taxpayer money to settle out of court. Detroit couldn't afford $8 million back then. Detroit couldn't even spare $8. Yeah, this guy's in prison now. Maybe the worst mayor in U.S. history, and there's been a lot of bad mayors in Detroit. Now, it's worth noting that each of the cities we talked about has a large and largely poor black community. A lot of African Americans were sold on the concept that the Democrats represent the little guy, so they keep voting for him. Have black lives improved? Do black lives really matter to Democrat leaders? I don't know. Look at this list of cities where there hasn't been a Republican in charge for a very long time. Do these places remind you of greatness? I hardly ever hear anything good about them. It's mostly bad news. These Democrat mayors are leading cities deeper into poverty while they raise taxes and allow homeless people, criminals, and illegals to just roam free. They're certainly not breaking generational poverty and dependence. They've had their chance at leadership and they are failing, I'll tell you that, right? No wonder places like Detroit, Baltimore, St. Louis, and Cleveland are all at the top for America's fastest shrinking cities. People have had enough, but sadly, there's still likely no end to the Democratic leadership in these sinking cities. Dr. Martin Luther King said it best, "No city in America that expects greatness should ever elect someone of Democratic leadership. For if that city chooses to be led astray into the darkness that is liberalism, that city shall never be whole again." JK, he didn't say that. I made that up. But he should have. Things would be much better today if he had. Hey guys, so if anything I just talked about upset you or made you sad or mad, well then do something about it. Call your local leaders and demand change. Chip in and help those in need. Make your community better, because communities don't get better without hard work and determination. America's a great place. It just needs some more love and pride.
This is Sage, Nick's manager. This has been a Corner House Entertainment production.
And are you looking to move and need advice? I do consulting. That's right. I'll sit down and talk about where the next perfect place for you and your family should be. I do it all the time. Together, let's find you a new home that's safe and checks all your boxes. You can get my email in the description to find out how I can help you find your perfect relocation. And I can also help you find your new house, too. Email me and I'll work with you on not just helping you figure out where to move, but I can help you find your perfect home, too. That's right. Someone's a realtor now. Who wants to deal with a realtor they don't know when you can have me help you, right?